On Sunday, we will see the Chargers take on the Seattle Seahawks in their final game that they will have before the bye week. So, as we do every single week, we're going to be going through some of the key matchups for the Chargers going against the Seattle Seahawks and go through step by step on who will win these matchups and how important these matchups can be for the success of the Chargers. Now, if that's something that you enjoy, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. But let's not waste any more of your time. Let's go ahead and get right into this. Now, first things first, something that we got to talk about, and we're going to kind of bring it up as we go through, is going to be the injuries. And for the Seattle Seahawks, there's no major injuries that really need to be known about. They're going to be missing one of their cornerbacks, and Tyler Lockett is questionable. But for the Chargers, there's a pretty extensive list. Now, for the questionable players, we do have Sebastian Joseph-Day, who has been a huge piece in the run defense for the Chargers in the interior line, as well as just causing chaos in the passing game. And another questionable player is going to be Keenan Allen, who has not played in a very long time. I think since week 2 is the last time that Keenan has played. Now, quotes have suggested that Keenan Allen believes that it would be best for himself to return after the bye week, but he said that if he feels ready to play on Sunday, he will be playing on Sunday, so there is still a chance that he will play. But for the Chargers, the players that will be out do include Donald Parham, who was out in concussion protocol, and that's kind of a big hit as he just returned and he wasn't good. Joshua Palmer, who was the wide receiver 2, is going to be out due to concussion protocol. Joshua Kelly will be out due to a injury, I believe, leg-related injury. He will be out. Dustin Hopkins is going to be out due to a hamstring. So there's 4 players that have contributed quite a lot that are going to be out for the Chargers. Now, let's kind of go ahead and get into some of these matchups now that we've kind of went over the actual injuries, as I think those things will be important. But since there's no major person missing, as Corey Lindsey will likely return after that illness hopefully has went away, it shouldn't be a huge impact. And Keenan Allen being the biggest person on that list, and Sebastian Joseph-Day, Keenan Allen has missed so much time, it's not that huge of a deal if he is to miss this game. So let's get into this. First things first, I want to talk about is Justin Herbert and the receiving game going up against the Seattle Seahawks passing defense. Now, the Seahawks hit on some pretty solid cornerbacks in this past draft, but even with that being said, they have not been incredible on the passing defense side of things and not been able to stop many teams. They've allowed a 66% completion percentage, which is, definitely not very good to see at all. I mean, for the Chargers, it is good to see, but as a team, that's not something great to see, as you'd hope to see that be a little bit lower. Right around 7% is close to that elite level when you're averaging that throughout an entire year. They're also the 3rd highest yards per attempt allowed at 7.8 yards per passing attempt, which, for the Chargers with Justin Herbert, that is not something that couldn't be used against them. Justin Herbert can sling the ball, and that's something we're going to talk about here in a second, but the passing offense has not really shown that ability so far yet this year. They're also 9th in passing yards allowed. They're the 2nd highest first down percentage allowed per pass or on passing downs, which means 38.3% of the time that you pass the ball, it will lead to a first down. Even though the Seattle Seahawks have been poor on pass defense, the Chargers do have some worries to worry about themselves. As mentioned, currently Palmer is listed as out and Keenan Allen is listed as questionable. Now, with Mike Williams being your wide receiver 1 since Keenan Allen has been gone, Palmer was your wide receiver 2. He is now out, so you're going to have Carter move into that wide receiver number 2 spot after being brought to this team primarily as special teams. He's definitely taking a step up. DeAndre Carter, that being said, has turned into a very viable option and a good wide receiver for this team, but definitely isn't, maybe built to be a wide receiver 2 on this Chargers team with how it was built. And their 3rd and last wide receiver that's left on the active roster is Moore. Now, with only 3 wide receivers on the active roster, they're bound to have to bring somebody up from the practice squad. But the top performer on the practice squad, who has already joined 3 times, being Michael Bandy, because of the new rules, can no longer play another game unless he's moved to the active roster and signed to a contract.
So you're left with other practice squad players that maybe haven't proved enough that would have to be moved up, unless the Chargers are to give Michael Bandy a actual contract to be able to play the rest of the year on. Now, with Herbert, the team is still going to be able to move the ball pretty effectively, and they've already shown the ability to do that even when missing Keenan Allen. Herbert by himself is going to be able to get you a pretty solid amount of yards, and he's already shown on multiple occasions that he can throw for 300 plus passing yards and, hit 8 to somewhere around that 8 range of different receivers catching a ball. He's already done that multiple times. I think the very first game of the year, he had 9 receivers catch a pass, and the next week he had like 8. So he's consistently moving the ball to multiple receivers. So the fact that you're not having Palmer or Keenan isn't such a big worry, because he's already shown that he can make connections with some wide receivers, some tight ends that maybe don't get as much playing time as some others already do. Now, many times this year, Justin Herbert has been able to will this team into a spot where they can, make these big plays. And I spoke about this last week and many times before. I think Joe Lombardi isn't putting Herbert in a spot where he can use his arm ability. And one stat that I think is really good to look at, especially with the fact that the Seattle Seahawks are allowing that 7.8 yards per attempt, is the fact that, all these numbers that Herbert, as the lead of this offense, has already put an incredible resume, an incredible year together so far. Currently, the Chargers rank 2nd in completions, 11th in completion percentage, 6th in passing yards, 8th in passing touchdowns, and Justin Herbert has the highest QBR rating on passes over 20 plus yards. So I think now is the perfect time for Joe Lombardi to really start to open this playbook a little bit and let Herbert throw some deeper passes. I feel like every pass, or at least 2 out of every 3rd pass, is a short pass, 2 or 3 yards downfield. And I think this is the game where you start to let Herbert air it out a little bit. Throw some passes that are way past the line, or past the first down consistently. Throw some deep balls. Toss these in there. I mean, as the best quarterback on 20 plus yards this year, going against a defense that is, I think like 30th or 29th in passing defense, this is the perfect time to let Herbert sling it. Now, the next thing I want to talk about here is going to be the fact that the Seattle Seahawks honestly kind of have a sneaky passing attack. Currently, Tyler Lockett is listed as questionable, as mentioned before, but the Seahawks have been great all year, no matter who is playing. With Geno Smith taking the position of Russell Wilson as he was moved to the Broncos, there was a lot of questions on how good this team could do, but with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, the Seahawks have been top 10 in a lot of categories in the passing attack. They're first in completion percentage with 70%, which is extraordinarily high. They're 5th in yards per attempt, which is also very, very good. Which, I mean, when you have such a good completion percentage and you're getting so many yards, you're going to be able to move the ball downfield pretty well. They're 13th in total passing yards. They're 3rd in QBR, which, again, props to Geno Smith for doing an incredible job at being so consistent at finding the open man, and also props to the coordinators and the coaching for that team to be able to drop plays that will force there to be a man open, and then Geno Smith just has to make a simple read. But even with a great passing game, the Chargers can still slow this Seattle offense down pretty well. If Lockett doesn't play, the Seahawks will become immediately worse due to it. And I think he does bring a huge part of this offense, but the fact is DK Metcalf and the rest of this offense will still be able to produce at a pretty solid level without Lockett. But Asante has been playing great all year long. Derwin James has the size and the speed to match up pretty well with DK Metcalf. And, Asante, I think, matched up pretty well with Tyler Lockett. So you have wide receivers to DBs that match up pretty well and can force a pretty solid matchup that's not going to be able to allow a huge breakout game, or not breakout, but a huge game for either of those top wide receivers. But the biggest question mark for this Chargers team is going to be J.C. Jackson. He's had some major struggles so far this year and was actually benched at the start of the second half last game. But the hope is that he can bounce back and, get to his normal self this game. hopefully this game, and if he does or if he doesn't, could honestly make a huge impact on this game. So far this year, J.C. Jackson, every single game, has allowed a huge play to the offense. I mean, last week we saw 2 huge plays. We've seen deep touchdown passes. We've seen 40-yarders, 50-yarders, all over the field against J.C. Jackson. So if he can get back to normal self and really just shut that down entirely, this offense of the Seahawks is going to be slowed down dramatically. But if J.C. Jackson struggles some more, this Seahawks offense will likely be able to find at least a couple big explosive plays that will keep them in the game just long enough to make this a real battle for the Chargers. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is still going to be about the Seattle offense, and that's going to be the fact that the Seahawks have been really hit or miss on the scoring side of things. The Seahawks have been all over the score this season. They have been held to 17 points and 7 points respectively to the 49ers and the Broncos, who are some of the best defenses in the entire league so far to this year. But the Seahawks have also scored 48 points against the Lions and 32 against the Saints. So they have really been able to score a ton of points and also been held to a low amount of points at the same time. With 3 games above the league average of 22 points per game and 3 games below the league average, it's going to be really hard to predict what the Seattle Seahawks final score is going to be. Now, the Chargers have also allowed scores at very random times, holding both the Raiders and the Broncos to below 20 points, but also allowing 38 points to the Jaguars. So it's going to be really hard to effectively predict how good this Seattle Seahawks offense is going to produce and how many points they're going to be able to score, as they've shown that they can score a ton of points and they've also shown that they can be slowed down dramatically. The Chargers defense has shown that they can slow pretty solid, if not great leveled offenses such as the Raiders, but have also shown that they can get a ton of points dropped on them at random by an offense that isn't so great, such as the Jaguars. Now, the next topic I want to talk about here is going to be the Chargers team that kind of has a chip on their shoulder at this point. Herbert didn't look happy with the way that this team won last week. If you saw the video, as everyone else is celebrating, he just kind of looks casual about it and shakes the hand of his coordinator and just kind of moves on. There's no like big joy. Yeah, but your kicker kicked the winning field goal. Yeah, that feels great. But he wasn't happy with how the team won. He was happy they won, but he wished that it could have been by a bigger margin and it didn't have to go to overtime. Derwin James has not been happy with how this team has been performing, and even though they're 4-2, we think they can be much better. I think today there was a talk on ESPN about what Derwin was saying, and to be honest, some people are kind of bashing Derwin for it, but I think it's true. I think this team can be a lot better than, even though this record is 4-2, and that's a very, very good record, and they were right on the verge of being 5-1. The fact of the matter is that this team could still be performing a lot better, even for the record that they're at currently. J.C. Jackson says he's getting locked in, and he's going to be the first one in, last one out, and he's starting to realize his mistakes, and if he can get things going, that's a huge bonus to this team. Keenan wants to get back on the field and show everybody what he's capable of. Staley is tired of all the doubts from everyone, and this team really is starting to come together. Now, lastly, let's kind of move on to my predictions, and first things first, I want to talk about the fact that we don't know if Keenan Allen's going to play. So, whomever is wide receiver 1, I expect them to have somewhere around 100 yards and at least 1 touchdown. I also think that Gerald Everett's going to have a pretty solid game here, and I think that Herbert will likely have somewhere around that 300 yards and 3 touchdown game. For the Seahawks, I think they're still going to be able to score a pretty decent amount of points. They've shown, unless they're going against top-level defenses, they've been pretty solid. So, my final score prediction for this game is going to be 31 points for the Chargers and 24 points for the Seattle Seahawks. But what are your guys' thoughts? What are your predictions for this game? Do you think the Chargers are going to win, and by how much, and who's your breakout player for this game? If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. And as always, I hope you taught something today. Hope it made you smile. Hope it made you laugh. Some really important to me, affects most day in a great way. And as always, you guys all be safe out there.
But something deep inside won't let me